Welcome to Right Side of the Brain, the arts and health podcast created by Interact Stroke Supports. Our guest in this week's podcast is author, mentor, voiceover artist and stroke survivor Sas Freeman. This interview was recorded during the period of the lockdown. Sas Freeman, welcome to Right Side of the Brain.
Thank you very much, Nirjay. Thank you for inviting me.
You're more than welcome, Sas. So, Sas, why don't we start at the very beginning? Could you, for the benefit of our listeners, tell us where you were born and your childhood?
I was born and grew up in Worcestershire, and so very rural, sort of quiet upbringing. And I went to school at a convent, and I was incredibly shy, painfully shy actually, as a child. So I was far happier with my pony than at school. And it's only more recently, I suppose, now that my son Henry has grown up and left school, and some years on from leaving uni, I realised the difference in that he still had discipline at school, but they also had a lot of fun, and they're really still in contact. And during this time that we're in at the moment, they're all Zooming and staying in contact. And I realised that even more, that my childhood, probably the nuns were really strict and quite scary, and I can see the comparison more dramatically now.
There you were as a rather shy child, as you said. So what were your aspirations, Sas, as a young person?
I think because of this shyness, I thought I would sort of probably play things a little safe. So I got my place in uni. I was going to Brighton University to do a teaching degree, but I was going to have a year out first and go to family friends as a nanny to Santa Barbara. So everything was planned, but it would probably do me good and stop me from being so shy, I suppose. So everything was planned and in place up until very close to that happening. And they announced that they were getting divorced. So it changed everything. And obviously, I didn't know what to do. Having deferred my place and still this shy, sort of anything but outgoing person. So I thought I'll really do the unexpected and throw myself in the deep end, and I'll go to London for 6 months and take it from there. And beyond that, I don't think I thought it through, really.
When people say that they were shy as children, quite often they enter into a world of things like books or things like activities which are very solitary. Books, writing. You talked about your pony. Did you have any friends as a shy person?
Oh, yes. I mean, I wasn't that bad. I did have my friends. I went to stay with them for the weekend. They would come and stay with me. I did do with ponies and things. I still somewhat reluctantly went to pony club, bridal club events and things, but I wasn't the one that was forthcoming with the conversation, and at that stage going up and making new introductions and going and really exploring new things, and I was more uncomfortable with any of that, really, and so I suppose, yes, my pony and my small group of chums, rather than having a larger group, I was more comfortable with.
And you said there, Sas, that you were going off to Brighton to do a teaching degree. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
What made you want to choose teaching?
I wanted to do that with primary school children, and I just felt that was best suited to me, and that was something I had a drive to do, and I would feel comfortable around children. I was naturally comfortable around children. And I felt that, rightly or wrongly, that was something that I could hopefully offer something to. And
So before you then started your degree, you head down to London.
well, yes, and this is the problem, you see, Nirjay. I went to London for 6 months, but sadly or not, I believe things happen for a reason. I stayed for 9 years. So I didn't actually do the degree. I do regret that because I wish I had got my degree. And friends were trying to convince me when it was coming up to the time for my place to go. But I have to admit, life in London, albeit not a brilliant job, and I was probably earning peanuts, was fun. And I liked it, and it was pretty difficult to give it up. So the thought of then going and studying and leaving that, well, I just wasn't ready. So sadly, I didn't do my degree.
So actually, you ended up working when you came down to London, which had originally it had been meant to be a 1 year gap year,
Yes.
but you ended up working for many years. So could you describe the various jobs that you were doing?
Well, my first ever job there, I worked in Liberties as a sales assistant, and then I moved into Bond Street to Etienne Eigner there. And then I actually noticed this advert for a local Surrey newspaper, and it was a rep for the property section. And I liked the sound of that and thought that I was ready at that stage to apply. So off I went. But this is where the degree bit came back and bit me, because I was told, unfortunately, not having a degree, I wasn't successful. So I returned to what I was doing and still not really having a plan or any direction at that stage, just drifting, I suppose. I carried on for a while, but then I had a call from the company, pretty much to the tone of, we're desperate and you're better than nothing, i.e. the person they'd taken on was pregnant, but she didn't want to work through her pregnancy and didn't need to. So I literally was better than nothing. So they'd give me a trial, but they didn't promise, obviously, that I would be who they'd keep. But fortunately, things worked out and it was brilliant. So I stayed, despite the start of it getting horrendously lost, because obviously we didn't have mobile phones then. I didn't know the area. I borrowed the manager's car at that stage because they didn't trust me to have my own yet. And I got horrendously lost. I was late back. She was late getting home. But I thought, well, this is my last day, clearly. But no, they kept me on. And I absolutely loved it. And I stayed there for a long time, even launched a new newspaper for them. And then eventually I moved to the Evening Standard, doing the same job, but with the Evening Standard. Again, I stayed there for quite a long time, but moved pretty much over the road to a company owned by someone called Malcolm Denmark, who owns several companies now, but his first one was called Media Force, and that was buying and selling local advertising space, but for national papers just across the country. So dealing with the London agencies and things. So I'd gradually ease myself into having to be more confident, if you like, throw myself into more. And I was fortunate to get that job. So I stayed there for a long time.
So, Sas, this is the world of media advertising that you're talking about. And then at some point, you become a model.
Yes.
And you also become the double for Emma Thompson. So could you tell us about that journey?
Yes. So there's quite a few sort of diversions really in my life. So I left the previous one because I got married and we went abroad. Keeping that brief, it ended in divorce. So I returned with my son. I've need to work to pay off things and start again. So I did a whole mixture of jobs. The person I mentioned before who owned Media Force, he offered me a job with one of the other companies. So that was supervising people across the country. So I was able to do that with the modelling work and the television extra work. So I was working stupid hours around the clock, but I could literally finish one thing and then I could go off to the other, and I could just be anywhere. And it was quite exciting, actually, quite buzzy and fun. I then, quite by chance, had the one was yes to double for Emma Thompson in Brideshead. And I always loved that book and everything about Brideshead anyway. So I felt very honoured to do that. I was really looking forward to meeting her too, because I was also to return for another extra part within the film. But sadly, that was with all the floods, and I couldn't get back to Yorkshire. So I still haven't ever met her, which is sad. That would have been lovely. But that was lovely to have done. I've also been in All the Small Things, I think it's called, with Sarah Lancashire. Oh, The First Nativity, and one with Martin Shaw, The Affirmations, I think. So they were fun times. I was the mother of a possessed child, I think, in that. And I was fortunate that because I was able to have my equity card because of some jobs I did as well with the racing and a lot of talking through that, I could have just a few little words within things as well. So just made it a little bit more fun for someone like me who's, not an actor. So it was some really fun, exciting times.
There you are, Sas. You're working really hard in journalistic advertising. You're being the body double in various films. You're raising your son. You're juggling all these things. Would you be kind enough to describe the circumstances of your stroke? And the reason I prefaced it with all those things is I just wanted to know, was stress or being overworked one of the reasons that your stroke occurred?
To be honest, Nirjay, it hasn't been 100% confirmed what caused my stroke. There's a high chance that is the reason. Equally, I had a bad riding accident a year previously from a racehorse, and I did get very broken. There's some thought there could be clots travelling around from that. Others believe that's too long a time span. So I don't know. There isn't a definite answer on that, but there's a very likely chance, yes, with the degree of stress. And I was also very, very fortunate because I was traveling back from one of those jobs. It was one of the modelling jobs, actually. And I was traveling back on the motorway, lengthy journey to go home. So it was one of the rare occasions I was back home and in my own bed. And that's when my stroke occurred. There's every chance, of course, I could have been on the motorway because I did so many miles on my own, or I could have been in a hotel room on my own. And things could have been very different, of course.
So you've come home from a hard day's work. You've gone to sleep.
Yes.
Describe then what happened. You wake up in the morning, and what was going on?
I had a tremendous pain in a small area of my head. I'm quite familiar with migraines, so I knew it wasn't a migraine. It was just so different to a migraine. I can't describe how, but very, very different. So intense and just a small area. But stupidly, I thought, well, I'll take something. I will just go to work late. I'll ask Nick to take Henry to school, and I'm sure it will pass. But obviously it didn't. Things just continued to get worse. We had a dog, a little whippet, who sadly we've lost now, also from a stroke, who didn't ever bark. She would never bark. But strangely that day, she wouldn't stop. She wouldn't leave me and she wouldn't stop barking. It became really annoying because of this head pain, and she, bless her, was barking. And I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't get rid of the head pain, but I tried stupidly to get up, to get dressed, and I kept stumbling. Again, not thinking anything of it, continued to try to do so. And things got worse to the degree that I then felt my arm was a little funny, I would just phone a doctor and see what to do. Because as everything got worse, and I think at that stage actually I had noticed my face, very slight droop on my mouth. I thought if I was older, because I didn't know then what I know now, if I was older, I'd think I was having a stroke. But I'm fit, I do a lot of exercise, I'm healthy, and I'm young. I can't be, but maybe I should just phone for help. Everyone I seemed to know was out, so I didn't get any hope there. So I phoned the doctors that I was with at the time and didn't get any help there. And they said that my doctor was busy. So I later tried again for a ring back, but because I just kept on falling over, everything was getting worse. My eye was beginning to weep at this stage, and I just knew that something was very wrong. And my dog was actually getting much worse at this barking. So I tried to phone again. Now, at that stage, I thought I was talking and saying what I needed to say, but clearly the words weren't coming out as I believed they were. So this person said, if you can get here immediately, you can be seen. Well, I just thought, yes, of course, fine. And this is something that I'm not proud of, but I have put it in my book actually just to tell people not to do anything as stupid as this. But luckily I didn't harm anyone. I somehow got into my car. It is automatic. I now know I use my left foot for the brake and my left hand only for steering. I cannot to this day remember the journey there, where I left the car, how I left the car. I left it wide open and luckily it was still there, and how I managed to get into the doctor's. But I just about managed to get in and stumbled to the chairs. And fortunately, there was a doctor there who'd come to attend to an emergency, and she was from the hospital, and she knew immediately what the situation was. And so then it was identified, and it was suggested, yes, I went straight to the hospital. But I'd had that delay of time, and I stupidly drove.
Sas, could I unpick some of the things that you just said there, which were really fascinating? The first thing is, could you just clarify how long it was from the moment you woke up and you thought, I've got this really severe pain in my head and it's not like a migraine, from that moment to then things like feeling how your arm was going funny, to feeling how your face started to go strange, to feeling how your eye started to go strange. What was the time frame there?
This part, Nirjay, I don't really know. I mean, Henry would have gone off with Nick to school very early, so that would have been probably 7:30. They would have left mid-morning, possibly by the time I eventually got through, maybe later. What I now realize was I was drifting in and out of consciousness because it was my dog that was nudging me as I was lying on the floor. Well, I don't remember how I got to that particular situation, because my recollection was I had walked from the bed to the phone, but clearly I hadn't because I was lying there. So I was obviously drifting in and out. I had no idea of time. And the strange thing is, from going into hospital equally, I have no idea what time I arrived there. But I know that it was hours rather than an hour, half an hour, an hour.
The other thing that I wanted to just ask is, you're there at home and you're on your own.
Yes.
I think this is really, really interesting for our listeners who are listening to this, about having a stroke and being on your own. It strikes me from what you said that you didn't ring 999.
No, and this is why I'm now so passionate, Nirjay, about saying to anyone, if they see just one sign, please phone 999. And it doesn't matter if we're wrong. But I now realise I was so naive at, in my mid-40s, very fit. I stupidly didn't think that people had strokes then. Obviously, I now know that, yes, sadly, babies have strokes. I've learnt a great deal since then. But I didn't realize that. And it kept going through my head, thinking, because my father's had a stroke, thinking, this is just like a stroke, but I'm too young and
Mm,
I'm fit, I'm healthy, so it can't be. And I don't want to waste anyone's time.
mm.
So I didn't, which is why I thought if my doctor would speak to me, he would know, and he would have obviously called. But that is exactly the point you make, that I say now I made such a huge mistake. And my second stroke actually highlights that mistake, because I had that. The paramedics were called immediately, and I had absolutely no lasting damage from that. And so I think to be able to illustrate both comparisons, so if you like, my stupidity and ignorance for the first one, and how we acted on the second one, then it just shows people the importance of phoning 999 at just one sign of stroke.
And Sas, what's the time frame between your first stroke and then the second stroke?
Probably only a couple of months.
Right,
Yeah, 2 or 3
right.
months, I would say.
So there you are. You finally got into hospital. They've diagnosed that you've had a stroke, which I'm guessing comes as a shock to a relatively young Sas Freeman, who assumes that strokes only happen to the elderly. What happened next? I'm particularly interested in what happened rehabilitation wise.
Before that, because of the young fit bit, and we had a skiing holiday planned, I was in denial for a long time. I could not accept that I'd had a stroke. I kept thinking everyone's got it wrong, they'll realise, and I'll be out of here, which is ridiculous. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move anything on my right side. But in my mind, I just wasn't ready to accept it. So denial was a safer place. So it was better to think that they were wrong. And the funny thing was, when I had my second, one member of staff, in a lovely way, not a patronising way at all, gently said to me, and he was so lovely the way he said it, "Did you go on that skiing holiday?" And we were able to laugh about it all, and it was lovely. So I don't remember anything really of that first part of hospital. I do then remember when I went into the rehab section. And bearing in mind this is 10 years ago, and I'm now very involved, as you know, with where you came and kindly performed your play at the Evesham Rehab Centre, that was only just opening. And so I wasn't fortunate enough to be able to go to that, because I was young and I didn't need a hoist at that stage. And they were thinking that I would benefit from eventually, when I could leave home, to having the intermediate care team come to me at home every day. So that was the plan for me, rather than send me to Evesham, where at that stage it was just very few and the older people. So we were the very last ones to be in the old ward at Worcester Hospital, and the rehab pattern then was very, very different. Now in Worcestershire, it's 7 days a week. It's very varied. They have full speech therapy. They have singing therapies. They have everything, and it is wonderful. And we run, as you know, the family education group to help the family members, to prepare them all before they leave. But we didn't have any of that. So I just had what was called 15 minutes in the gym each day. So that was my physio, and then the OT would join us. And it was just pretty much practice little bits on your own by the bed in between. But I struggled so much with neurofatigue at that stage that I would fall asleep after that 15 minutes anyway. And I did still sleep a great deal of the time. That may have been another reason they chose for me to stay there rather than go to Evesham. But it was just opening, as I say then. So there was very little rehab at that stage until I left and went home. And then I did have the physios and the OT who came to me every day for the allocated amount of time. Then, because I had my second stroke, that was able to extend. But the scary thing, as you know, yourself, Nirjay, from experience, is that as soon as that finishes, you then have another 15-minute slot or 20 minutes perhaps, that you have to attend as an outpatient once a week. And then when that time frame has finished, you're on your own.
Mm.
And it's really scary. For me, I was very fortunate because I'm stubborn. So there, my path took a positive route. But as we know only too well, for many people, that's where recovery stops.
And Sas, one of the most common feedbacks that I get from stroke survivors when I ask them the question, what's the thing that you worry about the most?
Yes.
The most common answer is having another stroke.
Yeah.
And there you are, you've come out of having a first stroke. Could you describe the circumstances of what happened with the second stroke?
Yes, in a way, I was very fortunate. Exactly the same as most, if not all, stroke survivors. I was very nervous about having a second one because I had little or no mobility and I was still struggling cognitively with just about everything. People had to come in to get me up, washed, dressed. I could feed myself, but that was pretty much all I could do. So I thought, if I had a second stroke now, where will that leave me? And so that was always at the back of my mind. But it was when the OT was with me for one of her sessions, quite by chance, she'd had to change her day. Don't know why, she'd had to change her day and her time. So she happened to be there when the second stroke occurred. And she called 999 immediately, and she actually went into hospital with me. And then I had obviously care immediately, and that was fine. The positive out of that, I came out feeling more confident because I thought, well, that fear's gone. I've had that second stroke, and actually I'm no worse for it.
Yes.
And I didn't have to stay in hospital as long. I'd convinced them that because I have this team coming in every day at home, I'm having a lot more therapy at home than I'm having at the rehab centre here in the hospital. So it frees up a bed for you, and it's better for all of us if I go home. And I did win that one. So yeah, it helped my confidence.
And Sas, just for the benefit of our listeners, could you describe the initial effects of that first stroke? You talked about paralysis, etc. What state were you in?
So I lost all the use and feeling of my right side. It was actually turned in, and my foot was turned very obviously in. My face still would have a tendency for my eye to droop slightly and weep when I was very fatigued. Otherwise, apparently visually it looked okay, but to me it still felt as though it was in that very drooped position. Cognitively, and I had speech problems. I had to learn to read again as well. And I noticed that even watching television was just a challenge, too much of a challenge, really. Everything was happening too quickly. It was far too much to process. I had to try and listen to the conversation, and all the pictures were changing. Everything around me was a challenge. Conversation with people moving around in a room, that was too much. So cognitively, I would become fatigued again very, very quickly. So with memory, with neurofatigue, and cognitively, that was a big, big issue. And I still struggle now with neurofatigue, and I have to have a sleep every single day. I still struggle remembering dates, names, and numbers because I didn't have formal help for my speech. A speech therapist now that I've got to know tells me that is the reason really that I still have a big problem with that, because again on the rehab ward they help from the beginning with pretending to buy things and working with numbers and money, just everyday life situations. Whereas now if I go and buy something and someone gives me change, it's as though the brakes go on again in my mind, and they could easily shortchange me because I just can't work it out.
I was struck by a comment that you said there, Sas, just slightly rewinding, where you said after the second stroke it gave you a sense of freedom because you described it as, well, it can't get any worse now. I now know what what I have to go through. So was it from that sense of sudden freedom that you then started to look at the world of art? Because I'm interested in your journey to becoming an artist.
Um, it was almost by mistake rather than any credit to me, and I think it's thanks to two people in particular. I went to a stroke group, and someone that we know anyway, a local artist, had agreed to give up her time and come along, and we could all paint something. I thought, oh no, I can't move my hand, let alone do that, and this is just the wrong time for me to have come here. And it was just a fear. I didn't want to do it, but it was just a play with a brush and some watercolor, and but I got into such a state, I even put the brush into the person next to me's tea instead of the water, and it was all just, I was flustered. But at the end of it, I was ready to throw this away. And then I thought, well, no, I don't want to insult anyone and make it look as though I hadn't tried, but it's just, I obviously won't be any good at this. And I'd forgotten it was in the bag, and Henry had found it and said, oh, I like this. And I thought, oh, he's just humouring me. And then a friend said the same, as did Nick. And I thought, oh. And then it was a friend's birthday, and obviously I can't get out, I can't drive, I've lost the independence, and I wanted to give him a birthday card. So I thought, oh, I'll see if I can. Oh, that's it. So there's this person had actually said, take this brush and these watercolors back with you and have a play. Said, I think you should. I thought, well, I don't imagine I'll use these, and that I'll kindly return them and thank her. But so I thought, well, I've got these. I'll see if I can paint a card. So I copied something and I had a go, and I thought, well, at least it's going to make him laugh. If nothing else, he'll have a laugh on his birthday. So that was that. Then a friend said, well, I think you should try and copy this painting. So that started. I hadn't a clue what I was doing, but just with watercolors, because I wasn't thinking about it, I had this freedom. And I somehow then had this independence, something I could start and finish without having to say to someone, please, can you help with this? Please, can you lift this? Can you do so and so? It was something I could do on my own. So that was lovely. Then we were in Cornwall, and we were in Polperro, a place we like. And this local artist, who's now become a friend, Sue, was she'd put on this event to raise money for charity. And she said, oh, come and paint a square. You pay so much and you paint the square. Oh, no, I can't paint. Somehow she persuaded me and said she'd sit with me and help me. And between the two of them, that was the start of my painting. She said, right, now I shall send you another square next year. And in between, I'll send you some little bits to do, and I'll encourage you and I'll help you. And as I say, we've become friends, and they were my inspiration.
So is your medium watercolour then, or have you moved on to things like acrylics and oils?
Well, I loved watercolour, and that was to be my medium, I thought. And then Sue suggested I tried acrylic. Well, I did, but for me, it all dried too quickly, and I didn't like it because I'm using my left hand when I'm right-handed. By the time I've worked out what I want to do, it's dry, and so I thought, oh, I don't really like that. And then someone suggested I tried oil. I said, why are you doing watercolor? It's the most difficult thing you can do anyway.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I've tried the other two, so why not? Oh, well, I love oil. Absolutely love it. And I quite like the smell. And I know it takes forever to dry, but I love it. And I love the fact you can just sort of have the thickness of it, the different textures, I love it. So oil's now my medium. And I don't think I could go back to watercolor because I wouldn't know how to do it now.
Do you have any favourite artists yourself that you admire?
I do. I love seascapes and landscapes. So I particularly like Richard Tuff and Andrew Tozer and Kurt Jackson. I like his. I love great big paintings as well. And I love Sue's, although Sue's is something Sue Lord, I could never attempt because they are more like you feel you're walking into the picture because it's almost really more like a photograph. It's so real. But because I think I have that bond with Sue, I love her seascapes too. But I just love those others, and I I, like many others, got drawn into attempting to do something in the style of Richard Tufts, which of course was the biggest mistake ever and ended up in the bin, because he has this technique of making it look so simple and so lovely. And I understand he's one of the most copied artists, but of course no one can do it.
Sas, what would you say are the major problems that face stroke survivors?
I think with the current situation we're in, it's the isolation, the initial isolation of when they're in hospital, and obviously family are not allowed to visit. I know that they're allowed Zoom calls and things to try and help with that. But of course, if you have aphasia, if you're struggling in the way that we do cognitively, that doesn't work either, really. And you just need people, don't you? Family and someone to be around you. So it's that. And it's also the isolation once you're back home, because often people have had to go, not suddenly, but in a different way because of the situation. They can't access rehab as they ordinarily would have done. So they haven't had that transition back to home that ordinarily they would have had. So everything has felt as though it's somewhat rushed from this handheld situation to being on your own, that isolation, much quicker. And I think because of that, they're very afraid of the second stroke that we also mentioned, and then having to go back to hospital during this time. And also another huge fear I'm finding from families that are contacting me is that the stroke survivors are scared about going backwards with their rehab because they haven't got the guidance. How do they know what to do if they're doing it correctly? And so that is a big fear. And then also when they can eventually go out and they feel that they're able to, it's the fear of going out and being at risk.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you something, Sas. A lot of stroke survivors have quite often said to me, and I just wanted your view on this, but they've quite often said to me that when they were in the hospital, doctors and stroke specialists would quite often say to them, the first 6 months are the most important, and whatever you get to at that 6 month point, then that's it. You'll plateau, so you've got to work hard now for the first 6 months. And so many stroke survivors, after the 6 months, they sort of then get into a mindset of thinking, right, well, so I've now reached the level that I will be at. And yet I've met so many who years later have suddenly made further improvements. So I just wanted to know whether you had a similar experience and what could be done about that.
I agree. That is a huge thing. And I think that plateau word is so damaging and so scary, because when we first have a stroke, we don't know anything really about, if we're not medical, we don't know what's happened, what's ahead of us, etc. So we listen to the advice, every snippet of advice we're given. So if someone says something like that, we believe it. I left home in a wheelchair, as I described, with the words, that's as good as it's going to get. And those words didn't ever leave me. But fortunately, because of other things, they did become my inspiration. But that could have been that damaging stop, full stop, and I could be like that now. In many of my talks to medics, I stress the importance of language and how damaging that is, and the benefits of neuroplasticity. And fortunately, a lot more are coming on board with that now, and there's a lot more evidence out there to support the benefit that neuroplasticity does work, and also that mindfulness and visualization, the so-called airy-fairy things aren't actually airy-fairy. They do work. And I mean, one example of that is athletes who are injured. If they visualize their exercise routine every single day during that injury time, they lose a lot less muscle mass than those that don't. So it shows the power of the mind. So a lot more medics are coming on board and agreeing, but equally, sadly, there is the suing mentality. So if they haven't lived through it, how do they know what to promise us? So I always like to think that if they could say that it isn't easy, they can't say it's easy, but if we work hard and we believe in our recovery, it will keep presenting itself. It gets slower, of course it gets slower, but it always keeps presenting. And it doesn't matter what age we are when we have our stroke, because that's another fear, isn't it? When people say, oh, well, I was this age, so, I won't recover. Because exactly as you say, I've seen people that were doing so well, and then it's 6 months. It stops now, so I don't try.
I quite agree with that, Sas, and I think what you've said is very, very important and well put. Sort of related to that, do you think that stroke should change its name to brain attack?
If you think about it logically, why not? Heart attack and brain attack, it is very logical, isn't it? And it does it makes it far more self-explanatory. It makes it perhaps clearer in a way that people would respond a lot better, and understand that it is, sadly more and more young people are having strokes, brain attacks, whatever, and they get out of this mindset that it is something that is just an old person's disease. So maybe it is time, yes, to, if you like, rebrand it. And then, yes, that brain attack is spot on.
Now, Sas, you're a talented artist. What are your views then of the arts in relation to health?
I think arts play a huge place in relation to health. I think they help relieve depression and help mood. I think the service that Interact deliver is wonderful in that it gives stroke survivors a sense of being reconnected to normality and having enjoyment outside that normal rehab. But at the same time, it's beneficial cognitively. And I believe that helps with memory and concentration and engaging again. And I think singing has a huge benefit also, because not only is that uplifting too, but it's for people that have aphasia, it helps boost their confidence, and again it lifts their mood too. But because of tapping into a different area of the brain, they are joining in, they're still a part of something, and again it's aiding their recovery. So I think it's hugely beneficial, and it's putting back some of that enjoyment that stroke takes away.
And Sas, you mentioned your book. Could you tell our listeners about your book?
Yes, I have written my book, Two Strokes Not Out, because obviously two, and I'm still here. And it's just an honest guide. So obviously I'm not medical, so I haven't touched on anything medical other than the description of the types of stroke, etc. And I have had medical advice and clearance on that. But other than that, it's just a true, honest guide as to my way through things from the day stroke happened, describing exactly the mistakes I've made. And I mention all my mistakes in the hope that can prevent others making the same ones. It's honest, says it as it is, but equally there is humour in there, because we definitely need humour with recovery, because stroke takes that away too readily. And I'm fortunate that I've been supported in making it an audiobook in French, Spanish and Dutch, and it's available on Spotify as well. So, but when I sell the book, I donate a a certain amount of the funds towards raising awareness of stroke because of my mistakes and the things I've mentioned is something I feel very passionate about.
Mm. And what does the future hold for you, Sas? What are your plans? COVID-19 aside.
Well, despite COVID-19, actually, I have been still very busy with stroke things, and it's my life has just taken a completely different course, really, because of stroke. I mentioned it earlier, and I do believe everything happens for a reason.
Mm.
Obviously, I wish I'd never had a stroke, but I've met some really super people as a result of having my stroke that I wouldn't have met before. I wouldn't have met you. We wouldn't be here now. And for everything it's taken away, it's given me the gift of being able to help people. I've been fortunate in that I'm able to be involved in medical conferences and deliver talks there. I'm involved in different projects to do with stroke. So I'm able to, in my small way, make a difference at hopefully improving the things. As I say, in my small way, I don't mean that in a big-headed way, from lived experience. So yes, I wish I was medical as well so that I could have the combination of the two. But thanks to the people that I've been working with, I have learned a great deal. And so I'm able to, yes, from the platform of lived experience, hopefully change things for the better where it's possible to do so from my platform.
Sas Freeman, you're very, very inspirational, and I cannot thank you enough for appearing on this edition of Right Side of the Brain.
It's been a pleasure, Nirjay, and thank you again for inviting me.
That was Sas Freeman. For more information on our work, please do visit our website at www.interactstrokesupport.org. And if you're feeling generous, please do click on the big red donate button. We very much look forward to your company on the next edition of Right Side of the Brain.